you don't want to be at the receiving end of some of these um you know some of these episodes, whatever they
Yeah.
might be going through. You don't want to be, because
Mm.
at the end of the day they've not done it out of hatred or anything. It's just because they're ill, and the illness, they've done it as a defect of
Yeah,
the
that
illness.
that that sounds like you're sort of excusing it though.
You have to, in a way, though. You have to, in a way,
Mm.
because, all right. So, what can I compare it to? So it's like, all right. So let's look at other disabilities, right? So, if you saw somebody in a wheelchair and you're on a pavement, relative safety of a pavement, you would do everything in your power to make sure
Mm.
that the wheelchair user is not put in danger because of you, because of
Yep.
your own safety. So you'd put their safety ahead of yours, wouldn't you? Because you feel they're a little bit disadvantaged, not in a bad
Yep.
way, but, and as such, you look at mental illness. It could happen to anyone. It could happen to anyone. I mean, what does it take for somebody to act in an irrational way, or to act to make a decision, irrational decision that they've never done? I don't think it takes much. It only takes something to tip somebody over.
Mm.
So it's not excusing it. It's just, what can you do? It's become part of life, ain't it? I mean, life's gotten really, really much more. What's the word I'm looking for? Much more hectic, much more critical. To
Mm.
Well, we're living in critical times, aren't we? And as such, I mean, all right. So there was this incident about this guy in New York, and he actually pulled out a gun and shot somebody, shot two couples, and his excuse was the war in Palestine. You think, that's affected him in a way that
Mm.
nobody would have anticipated, nobody would have been able to predict. And as such, there are things that are affecting people. I mean, the riots in Stockport, was it Stockport? No, Southport. It affected a lot of people differently, and they took actions. And these are people that ordinarily might have been peaceful on a good day. But there are things that tips people over, don't they? Somebody's going through a nasty divorce. They're thinking about not losing their children to the other partner. They're left with nothing. Those are things that could, actually tip somebody over, and you could be at the receiving end of um, their the mental state, aren't it? The mental health state. So I don't know I don't know how to approach it personally. I just think, just pray that you're not in harm's way while going about your own, business, because it could happen to anybody. You know.
I mean, it sounds like you're saying though that when somebody does something bad, whether it's violence or stealing or whatever,
Yeah.
you seem to be saying that they're not responsible for their actions. That
Right.
any crime they're not responsible for. Is that what you're
Right.
saying?
Right. They are 100% responsible for, their actions. However, how do you hold them accountable? How do you hold somebody that is not in the right state of mind? How Excuse me, how do you hold them responsible for something that they've done? They probably don't know they've done it. They probably don't understand the gravity of what they've done. So, you know, what are you to do? I'm not saying they're not responsible. I'm not saying they should not be held responsible. They should be held responsible. Saying they're not responsible. I'm not saying they should not be held responsible. They should be held responsible. But to what extent? Do you hold them responsible? Do you put them in prison? Do you get them the help they need? You know, it's one of those things. It's one of
I
those
mean, I
things.
would have thought, I mean, the law allows for,
Yeah,
diminished responsibility, whereby
yeah,
a psychiatrist on both defence and prosecution will interview and decide and give the court a view
yeah,
about their culpability, about their accountability for what they've done. And of course, if somebody really is mentally ill, such that
yeah,
they don't really know what they're doing, well, the law will make an appropriate decision. I can remember a case again. It's when one of the Beatles, George Harrison, was attacked in his home in I think in about the year 2000,
yeah.
and he was nearly killed. It really wasn't said so much at the time.
Right.
Fortunately, his wife managed to hit the intruder who broke into their home
Yeah.
with a big heavy lamp, which kind of stunned him and knocked him out. Anyway, this guy was he nearly killed George Harrison. He stabbed him and all sorts of things. It was only his George's wife that saved him. As it happened, he died a year or so later, mainly from lung cancer. But they think his situation was worsened, possibly by what had happened to him. Anyway, the guy concerned was ruled mentally ill, so he was placed into a mental facility
Yeah.
for an indefinite period. And
Mm.
it's sometimes when you see an indefinite sentence, so to speak, you think, oh, well, that's going to be a few years. Well, this guy was in this mental hospital or whatever it was just for a few months, and then he was
Oh.
out because they say he
Oh.
was cured. I don't know whether it's one of those cases where perhaps he hadn't taken medication. But anyway,
Oh.
the point being that the law does allow for people who do genuinely have an illness. But I would have thought the majority of crime, theft, all that goes with that is done by perfectly sane people. That's what is generally accepted to be the case. But,
Yeah.
yeah, the things can trigger. You can get crimes of passion and
Yeah.
things like that. But, yeah, I think ultimately if somebody steals my phone from me, I'm not going to say, "Oh, well, you keep it. You're obviously in a mental condition." I'd say, "No, give me my phone back." So you have a more you have.